There's one area that across the board is the weakest area that we see with clients' bodies, and that is the feet. It is also creating the most dysfunction throughout their bodies. On this week's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast, we're going to break down exactly how to go about building stronger feet. We're going to cue our introduction, and we're going to dive right into this conversation. Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast, brought to you by Exercise for Life Studios, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset. And the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie.
And today we are diving into the feet. Across the board, we see that when people come in, one of the weakest areas and one of the areas that's leading to the most dysfunction throughout their entire body is their feet. And there are a number of reasons why our feet are so weak, but there's a lot that we can do about it to actually rebuild the strength of our feet. And that's what we want to walk you through today.
You know, Charlie, I think for a lot of people today, thinking that they can build the strength of their feet is a new concept.
That's
because,
true.
You know what? A lot of times people will realize, oh, when I'm lifting this thing, I realize my arms are weak and I can do something about that. I could strengthen my arms, or my legs feel weak when I'm doing this thing and I can strengthen them. But when it comes to a place like the feet, when your feet are not doing well or you're getting symptoms in them, we don't often think, oh, I need to strengthen my feet. We usually think, oh, I need different shoes, I need different orthotics, I need a different brace, a new ankle thing, or whatever it is. But I want to make sure that everyone is very clear on is there is an entire network of muscles in your feet, starting at the tips of your toes. They wrap around your heel, go up into your calf area or that lower bone on your leg. And these muscles are designed to support your feet. And when muscles are not working well in your feet, they can cause havoc, like you were saying, up the chain, up into your body, not only in your feet, which feet are a very commonly symptomatic area, but it can also lead to other stuff in your body. And we're going to discuss all this today because, again, it is such a common area where people have weakness. And I think it's really so common because, number one, we are like a species that are on our feet all day. You know, a lot of us have a lot of weight on our feet and we're doing a lot of steps. And especially if you're in the fitness world, your goal is to get even more steps. So you're using your feet even more. And then number two, we don't really realize that feet have muscles that need to be strengthened. We kind of just wake up thinking, oh, my feet should work today. And when they don't, we think it's like a medical issue or a serious issue versus like, hey, they're just deconditioned. I've literally never done foot things. I've literally never thought about my foot muscles. And again, it's such a powerful place. And so we're going to be breaking down how do you go about strengthening your feet, or how do you start thinking about these foot muscles that we've probably never, ever thought about before.
Absolutely. Julie, you bring up so many great points. And I mean, the point of like, hey, we just wake up and expect our feet to work. We don't think, oh, I should be doing things to strengthen our feet. Like there's no other area of the body that we view that way. You know, we don't think, oh, like I should just wake up and, you know, my legs should be strong. I shouldn't have to do anything to strengthen my legs or my back or my core or my arms. I mean, maybe some people think about that like with their neck a little bit, but it's like, okay, your neck still has to be able to hold the weight of your head, but your feet have to be able to hold the weight of your entire
whole
body. And we don't ever think that, oh, we should do something to strengthen them. In fact, our first initial thought is we should do something to have to make them work less, meaning we should add something in. Like when people's hands start to get weaker and they have trouble like opening jars or opening bags of chips or whatever, we don't necessarily think, oh, well, I should be using something to have my hands work less. Like I should add something onto my hand to have it work less. But we think that with our feet, with the inserts that we use, with the shoes that we use and everything like that. But here's the thing, and so part of it is the way we go about thinking about feet, but I think the other part that you brought up, Julie, is because we don't realize that there are muscles that can get stronger, we don't realize how impactful strengthening the feet can be. Okay, 20% or nearly 20% of your body's skeletal muscles are within your feet. That's a huge density of muscles in the area of your feet. Like, again, we don't ever think about that. When we think about muscles, we think of maybe like leg muscles or, you know, arm muscles or, you know, maybe back muscles or something like that. We don't ever really think about foot muscles, yet nearly 20% of your body's muscles live within your feet. And so my question is, when was the last time that you really focused on trying to get those muscles stronger? Again, more times than not, the approach that people take is trying to do things to have them work less. I'm not talking about staying off the feet. I'm talking about adding in support so the feet muscles, the foot muscles don't have to do as much when you are actually using your feet. So we have a process by which you can go through to actually get your feet stronger, from very specific recommendations to more general recommendations. So whatever is, feasible for you, you'll be able to find something that you can do as we go throughout this episode. But you need to understand how important this is, not only from the volume of muscles that are in your feet. Like I said, nearly 20% of your body's skeletal muscles are within your feet, but the fact that your feet muscles can get stronger. You just need to know what to do, and then you need to actually go and try to strengthen them.
Yeah, Charlie, I don't think we've brought this up in like ages, but I actually got into MAT because I had severe plantar fasciitis.
Good point.
And I was a fitness girl, literally couldn't walk without these crazy thick like brick type shoes. They were like pronator shoes. And if you ever have had a foot issue, you know what I'm talking about. There's like these one certain types of shoes that you're like, I guess I'm married to these shoes for life. But what, as Charlie was saying, what these shoes are doing is they're supporting your foot. And although this might change symptoms, for many people it doesn't, but it is an external support. And that is a sure sign that your internal support system is not working. And it's also a sign that your internal support system needs to improve or should improve, unless you want to be married to these shoes for life. And a lot of people get married to certain types of shoes, or they can't go without shoes. Like I've heard a lot of people with heel pain or Morton's neuroma or plantar fasciitis, and they're like, yeah, I mean, I cannot not wear shoes. Like I have to always have shoes on. They're literally by my bed. So when I stand up from my bed, I put my feet right in shoes. And I am a Florida girl, so like if you're in Illinois, you have these comfy
Carpeted floors.
Carpeted floors, yes, and then you go right into slippers, and if you're in Florida, you go right into like a flip-flop or, a Croc or something. We realize like, oh, house slippers in Florida are a little different. Anyways, either way, immediately to start your day and throughout your day, you're in a supportive shoe. Why? Because your internal support system is failing you. And so that is your first signal to say, hey, I need to start strengthening this. You want to think about an external support system like an orthotic, a specialty shoe, anything that's supporting your foot, a brace, all those are external supports. Those are for temporary use. Just like if you hurt your elbow and you wrapped your elbow for a while, you would never be like, great, now for life, I'm going to wrap my elbow. No, you're like, I'm going to wrap my elbow until I don't have to anymore. And hopefully you're doing things along the way to speed that up. And then when you don't have to anymore, you stop using the wrap. For some reason, the one area of the body where we never stop adding external support is the feet. And so our feet get weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And honestly, I've seen this start from toddlerhood. We put our kids in these fashion shoes that can't bend. They have supports or they're stiff. And this is an external support. It's almost like a soft cast for their feet. And what happens with this is that you gradually build, and it's normal in our society to not have strong feet, because for so long we've had an external support, no matter how extreme or light that is, from our shoes. And so I think it's important to talk about the beauty of practicing even being barefoot. I think a lot of us never ever do that because we're always in a supportive shoe, and maybe you have good reason. You're like, well, it really hurts. Like my body tells me no when I'm barefoot, which is a good reason to not be barefoot, but it's also a huge signal saying, hey, if you can't handle not having external support, again, that's a giant red flag to say, hey, this internal support system, this muscle system has some great opportunity for your body.
Absolutely. So, Julie, you bring up a lot of really good points there, okay? One of which is this idea that a lot of times when your feet get weaker, you'll get some symptoms in the feet. You talked about your experience with plantar fasciitis. A lot of people will have like Achilles pain and tightness throughout the calves or through, the front of the shins, shin splints, things like that. But weakness in the feet can also translate into pain in the knees, hips, back, tightness throughout, even all the way up into the neck. When there's dysfunction in the feet, because when you are walking, when you're standing, that's the first thing that your body is going to react to, because that's the thing that hits the ground, and everything above that then is going to respond to either function or dysfunction, strength or weakness that's going on with the feet. Issues and weakness and dysfunction in the feet can manifest as issues and symptoms throughout the entire rest of the body, okay? And we've seen it so often with clients where they're coming in with a shoulder issue, and by getting their feet stronger, their shoulder starts to feel better. I mean, it's very easy that, the knees, the hips, the back, even up into the neck, but something like the shoulder, you'd be like, well, what does the shoulder have to do, or what do the feet have to do with the shoulder? And it's because of how often we are taking steps. If you take 5,000 steps a day, that's 5,000 repetitions every single day on weak and dysfunctional feet that your body is having to compensate around. If you're taking 10,000 steps a day, that's 10,000 repetitions every single day around weak and dysfunctional feet that your entire body is having to compensate around. Now, Julie, you also bring up a point about shoes. And yeah, stiff, like really supportive shoes, especially when they are not necessary, they can start to they do more harm than good. When they're used long term in place of actually getting the foot muscle stronger, they may start to do more harm than good. And oftentimes, the suggestion that's thrown out on social media is kind of going to the opposite extreme of this idea of, well, just start walking around barefoot. But here's the problem. Going barefoot is often too much for a lot of people, meaning you go from a really stiff and supportive shoe, or even just a mildly stiff and supportive shoe, into walking around barefoot. That's like saying, okay, you have not exercised, and now all of a sudden we are going to be, trying to have you squat 400 pounds. It's gonna be like, what? Like, what is just going on? Like, that's, your foot muscles are going to be freaking out, your knees, your hips, your low back, even, your neck all the way up to your shoulders. Your entire body is going to be freaking out if you jump into this barefoot training, barefoot walking around too soon, okay? So, how do we get to that point where you can actually use barefoot walking, barefoot training as a way of strengthening your feet without wreaking havoc throughout the entire body? That's what we want to walk you through right now.
That's right. So first, if you want to try out just taking your shoes off and walking barefoot, just see what it's like. I think that's like a good first step to see, how are my feet? Because a lot of us have been either fear-mongered or we've had a bad experience, and so we're not quite sure. So I always recommend to my clients, like, what happens when you walk around barefoot? And they're like, I don't know. I don't do that. I never have taken off my slippers at home or my shoes when I'm not at home. So we try it out. And if you want to start practicing walking bare feet, then I recommend doing a certain amount of time, like, for example, 1 minute a day. And then you can increase it over time as long as you're staying symptom-free. But at some point, you're going to reach your max, whether that's, 5 minutes a day, or, and it also depends on like what flooring you have. Like when I go to, my whole family lives in Florida, so everyone has tile floors there. For some reason, it feels way harder than our floor at home, which is like, it's a hard floor, but it's like a wood softer floor. I don't know if that makes sense. You flooring people that know about houses, you know about this. But anyway, so it just depends on how you're feeling. But then there's specific things that you can actually do to start strengthening your feet. The first one being the most specific, most direct way, which is get with your local MAT specialist. Muscle activation techniques is designed to look for muscles that are not functioning properly so that your internal support system can be fully there, fully present, or more fully present. Like the goal of the system of MAT is to get more and more and more muscles functioning. The more that we get muscles functioning, the more every joint is supported. So we test muscles from all over the body, including over 50 muscles just in your feet. And so if you do have a foot dysfunction, we will find it if it is related to muscles. But also knowing that the knees and the hips and the trunk, we often see muscles in those areas highly playing into how the feet are functioning. For example, my own plantar fasciitis story, I had to get my feet worked on, but first, most of my symptoms were taken away when I got MAT in my core, which blew my mind because podiatrists had looked at my feet for like 8 years and they only looked at my feet. And I thought, don't you think someone would have accidentally found the right thing to do? But after 8 years, no one was looking more full scope. And we know that your body is just so interrelated. And so for my story, for many of the stories of my clients that come in with plantar fasciitis, we know, and other foot issues, we know that the core, the hips, and the knees have such a powerful impact on how the feet are functioning. And if you are having foot symptoms, we already know the foot muscles are also being very stressed out because they're literally holding on for dear life. Like they're the last, they're like, I know there's a lot of us, but we are like going crazy. We're giving you symptoms to tell you to get off of us. We need help. And so we will test through every muscle of your foot if your foot is needing attention in that way.
Absolutely. So with MAT, this is the most specific thing that you're going to be able to do to really get every single muscle within each foot stronger. Like Julie was saying, there's 50 muscles in each of your feet, 100 muscles that we are able to test and get stronger individually with the MAT process. So from a specificity standpoint, you're not going to find anything more specific than MAT when it comes to strengthening your feet, okay? After you are starting to get all your muscles stronger in your feet with MAT, and Julie also brought up another really great point of like, hey, we need to make sure the muscles in the knees and the hips and the trunk are also working well, because guess what? If those aren't working well, it'll stress the feet out more. So as your body as a whole is getting tuned up with MAT, and as all those individual muscles within the feet are getting tuned up with MAT and getting strengthened with MAT, you can also start to add in some specific strengthening exercises. Now, a lot of times when we think about strengthening exercises for the feet, the one that comes to mind is like calf raises. Okay, we're going to do these for the calves and stuff. More growing in popularity now are like, ant tib raises, or doing muscles, or doing exercises rather, for the muscles on the front of your shin. But what about all the muscles of your toes? What about the muscles that spin your feet in and out and everything like that? So you can start to do exercises for those muscles. So how should you think about this? Well, you're going to apply the 4 exercise for life principles, but as it pertains to the feet, you want to think about the ways that your feet move, okay? They can point down, they can point up, okay? Generally speaking, they can kind of spin in, spin out, and your toes can bend and your toes can straighten. So if you just think about like those 6 muscles, that would be a really good starting place for most people for doing exercises for. Doing exercises that, where you're pointing your foot down, where you're pointing your foot up, where you're spinning your foot in, where you're spinning your foot out, where you're bending your toes and you're straightening your toes. And as a whole, that is not going to be as specific as MAT, but it will be more specific than just kind of generally doing stuff for the feet, because it is more closely matches the different motions of the feet, which means it more closely challenges the various muscles of the feet.
That's right. So sometimes you get to this step 2 of like, hey, I'm doing exercises for my feet, which is a great thing to do. You might start doing them and you're like, what? I can't do that. Or I can't do it on this side. Or when I do this cramps. This is a really good indicator that you may need to go back to step 1 and get more specific work done. Or maybe you skip step 1 and now you're just going to try foot exercises, which is fine. But that's a good also highlight to say, hey, I need this more finely tuned because my body can't even access these muscles. I can't even use them to strengthen them. I'm trying to do like a foot, quote unquote, light workout or workout exercises, squeezing muscles, practicing motions, but I can't even access these muscles. And so that's when the MAT would come in and play into these specific exercises. But Charlie, you hit it, you got it right, where we're thinking, what motions do my feet do? And start practicing these motions, because again, how often do people actually even exercise their feet? We do more immobilizing the feet by putting them in a shoe all the time, even a very flexible shoe, like a barefoot shoe or like a minimalist shoe. It is still some sort of restriction on the foot. And so we want to make sure that we continue to practice doing all these different motions, because when we practice doing them, that's how we keep muscles strong and conditioned in the foot so that it can be supporting all the arches of your feet, all the toes of your feet, all the motions of your feet, your ankle, and all the way up the chain and whatever your foot dysfunction is causing in your body.
Absolutely. So then step number 3 is you can start to play around with, and we're going to call microdosing walking barefoot. All right, so doing things barefoot, and it may just be like standing barefoot for a little bit. And then you can progress to actually like moving and walking barefoot. So, Julie, I really liked your idea of like, hey, just like start with a minute, just start with 60 seconds, see how that feels. Now, if you start to notice symptoms before the 60 seconds, well, then back off, okay? Like don't go past the point where you're noticing symptoms, okay? If you're going for a minute and before a minute is up, you're starting to notice symptoms, then take like 75% or 50% of that time that it took to get to that, the point where you're noticing symptoms, and just start with that. And it might only be like, 20 seconds or 30 seconds. You're thinking, gosh, is that doing anything? Well, yes, it is, because doing more than that was exceeding what your body could do. So we're just going to start within what your body can do symptom-free. And then every week or 2 weeks or whatever, you're just going to do a little bit more, all right? Never actually going to the point where you are noticing symptoms, never going to the point where you're trying to work through symptoms, just always staying within the point where it's symptom-free and it actually, it feels good. And so continuing just to progress with that, again, week after week after week, it sounds like, oh, this is going to be such a slow process. Is this even going to do anything? Well, when you combine it with doing MAT, when you combine it with doing the strengthening exercises, you're going to notice that you actually progress a lot faster than you may be thinking right now, okay? And more importantly, by staying within what your body can do from, a challenge perspective and a duration perspective, your body is going to get a lot stronger, a lot faster than always pushing to the point where it hurts, okay? Because let's be honest, right now, you're probably pushing to the point where it hurts, which is in some reason or some way, a primary reason why you may not be doing it that much, because every time you do it, it hurts. So we need to cut back on that and stay within the amount of time when it doesn't hurt.
That's right. And to give you some perspective on timeline is everyone's body changes in a different way, and especially in the feet, where everyone is basically deconditioned in your feet, unless you have actively worked on strengthening your feet. But for example, I recently had worked with a client, and she was having severe foot issues that were diagnosed, scanned, imaged, all these things, and she went the normal immobile route. So normally when you have an issue, you immobilize it, right? So she wore a boot to bed, she wore these intense orthotics, she had very specific shoes she could wear, which means one pair of shoes. And she's like, I literally wear tennis shoes and I'm a professional at work. Like, this is crazy. I can't wear my nice shoes. And she did this for 5 months. And all of those things were to relieve symptoms, to relieve pain. And so she finally reached out to me, and 4 weeks later, so that was 5 months versus 4 weeks, she's like, I am not all the way better yet, but I can tell I'm almost there, and I can wear more shoes, I can walk without pain, I'm back to exercising, and that is the power of the muscle system. Because I think sometimes when we think about like rehab or muscle strengthening, we think it's going to be so slow and so indirect. But sometimes immobilizing and resting is actually slower, and it takes longer, right? And it's not as direct. And so I encourage you, especially if you've been struggling with foot issues or things that you think might be related to your foot. For example, I broke my foot and it caused a lot of back pain. So I had to strengthen my feet and ankles so that my back would feel better. So if you have something like that, I really encourage you to go down this muscle route, because we know there's such a high density of muscles in your feet and ankles, which means there's a high opportunity for improvement with minimal negative side effects, right? It's not like we're cutting your ankle open and doing surgery, right? We're just asking you to strengthen your feet, which we should be doing anyway. So we really invite you to take on this opportunity to find your local MAT specialist, or if you're in the Chicagoland area, reach out to us, start doing some foot exercises, and start microdosing and slowly progressing your barefoot exposure so that your feet can start getting back to normal foot mechanics, so that not only your feet are feeling awesome, but the rest of your body is feeling supported with normal mechanics.
Absolutely. So if you're hearing this right now and you're thinking, yeah, I work out all the time, but I don't remember the last time like I directly strengthened my foot muscles. Nearly 20% of your body's muscles live within your feet. It is time for you to start strengthening your foot muscles. The most specific thing you can do is muscle activation techniques. If you're in the Chicagoland area and would like to work with us, you can visit us online and find a time where you can come in for your MAT assessment by going to matschaumburg.com. The next most specific thing is starting to do specific exercises, strengthening exercises for your feet based on some general motions that the foot does. Pointing the foot down, pointing the foot up, spinning in, spinning out, bending the toes, and straightening the toes. And then once you hit those 2 steps, you can start to microdose and microprogress your barefoot walking, your barefoot training. Okay. Again, this is not something that needs to be done for a large amount of time, but just little bits of exposure on a consistent basis can start to strengthen your feet. So follow these 3 steps to not only help your foot muscles get stronger, but like Julie was saying, help them function better and help the rest of your body become better supported and function better as well. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is either battling foot issues or you know for a fact they have not been doing much to try to strengthen their feet? Share this episode with them so they can understand a simple 3-step process they can start implementing today to help their feet get stronger and ward off some potential issues not only in their feet but throughout the rest of their system. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever platform you listen to us on and leave us a rating and review. Not only does it help people find our podcast when they're looking for information on exercise, it also helps them find our podcast when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week.
This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.